I'm not exaggerating when I say that, by the way. When I say some of our customers aren't human, I mean, I'll be delivering tulips to a nice elderly couple on one stop and a family of three-headed squid monsters on the next one. My order sheet never tells me which it's going to be either. Although if I'm delivering something like a houseplant covered in ice, I can usually make an educated guess. God forbid you get any of the delivery instructions wrong in my line of work too. I ran into a word tigress who damn near ripped my head off when I accidentally delivered a graduation bouquet to the house next door. She later called up the shop and told them I'd ruined her daughter's special day. The way I got this job is really nothing special. I was down on my luck, saw the posting on ZipRecruiter, drive your own car, be your own boss, make $75 per day, and thought, well, let's see where this goes. When I pulled into the parking lot of the dingy little back alley building where they made all their arrangements, I grabbed my nice, freshly printed resume, adjusted the floral print suit jacket I'd worn for the occasion. Don't judge me, I was desperate, and walked in the door of Southwest Sunset's floral arrangements. To be fair to them, it looks exactly how you'd expect a kitschy local business to look. I saw buckets of flowers, two young ladies stocking shelves with vases and potted orchids, and the woman who would, in a few minutes, become one of my supervisors. "Welcome to Southwest Sunsets," she said, with the same intonation I assumed she greeted every customer with. "Is there something I can help you with today?" The woman, whose name I would later learn was Anna, was heavy-set and middle-aged, wearing a tie-dye shirt, denim overalls, large hoop earrings, and pointed leopard print glasses straight out of a Far Side cartoon. One of her red Converse sneakers was untied. I suddenly felt overdressed. "I came here for the interview." She blinked. "Interview?" "I called yesterday," I said, gesturing awkwardly to my resume. "About the driver position." She smiled, bright and warm like a kindergarten teacher. "Yes, here's the application." She handed me a form to fill out. "Once you finish that, bring it to us with your license and proof of insurance, and we can get you scheduled on a route." My eyebrows flew up. "You're just going to give me the job?" She gave me an oblivious smile. "What else would we do?" I don't know," I said. "Most places interview you first." "Not here," she said, shaking her head. "Interviews are boring. Besides, we already have everything we need." I shrugged, choosing to ignore the red flags that this cryptic statement raised. All right. I filled out the application, and Anna handed me a contract to review and sign. I'm not a fool. I read it thoroughly, and to be fair to them, they were perfectly transparent about the risks of this job. The contract stated things such as neglecting to follow delivery instructions could result in injury, death, or metaphysical curses. Do not take tips from clients with horns or wings, and all wilted flowers are to be delivered to the mold at the end of your shift. I'd been through so many jobs at this point that I assumed it was just some sort of gimmick to show new employees how fun it is to work for them, the way a lot of places with millennial HR managers do. I signed it and returned to Anna's office. When I walked in, I found Anna speaking with a bald man wearing a blue check print button-up tucked into gray slacks. His back was turned to me, so I couldn't see his face. Anna heard me come in and peeked around him to look at me. "Thank you for filling that out," she said when she saw me, another kindergarten teacher smile on her face. She nodded to the man in front of her. "Nautilus, this is Theodore, our new driver." As I began to wonder why someone would name their child Nautilus, the bald man turned around, immediately answering that question. His whole head was an octopus. I mean, genuinely like a nerdy version of Davy Jones. Round spectacles over his little beady octopus eyes, tentacles where his beard should be, a rubber fitness watch wrapped around his wrist just above the shrimp feelers that served as his fingers. "Theodore," Nautilus said, with something approximating a smile appearing between his tentacles. He reached out for a handshake. "Nice to meet you." No one had ever taught me how to react when you meet someone with an octopus for a head. I thought about it, remembered the things I saw during my brief stint working at KFC, and decided I'd seen worse. I shook his shrimp feeler hand. "Theo is fine." "Theo," he said, tendrils wriggling as he spoke. "I'm Anna's husband, Nautilus. We own this shop together." "Nice to meet you, Nautilus," I said stiffly, feeling like I'd dissociated into some sort of waking fever dream. I glanced back at the contract I'd just signed, rereading a few of the clauses I had dismissed as fiction minutes before. After the sudden revelation that humanoid squids exist, I found myself viewing them in an entirely different light. I have to pause here to defend myself for a minute. Most people who found themselves in a situation like this would rip the contract in half, walk out the door, and never look back. There were more red flags than red roses in that shop. But for me, this was the best opportunity I'd gotten in months. You see, most employers you interview with will hear ADA accommodation and throw your resume in the trash. I have been slowly losing my ability to walk for the last 10 years, and for one reason or another, this progressive disease has invaded every facet of my life, to the point where holding down a job has become nigh impossible. And don't get on my case in the comments about applying for disability. Either I got denied 2 times, then denied by an advocacy agency 2 times, then denied by 2 lawyers who didn't think I would have enough of a case until after I was in the wheelchair. So until I end up a true paraplegic, I'm stuck jumping from one shitty part-time job to another and barely scraping by. These 2 folks want to hire me for a deadly job? Fine. If I don't take it, I'll die of starvation anyway. In the moment, I tried to rationalize it. I had been struggling for so long that I desperately wanted this to be a good opportunity. After all, they were friendly, happy to see me, and they seemed keen for me to start. Maybe they really were just a pleasant, middle-aged couple who own a flower shop, and the only reason they sped me through the process is because finding people willing to deliver flowers to Lovecraftian horrors is understandably difficult. Just a few struggling small business owners who needed a delivery driver. I wanted so badly to make all of these excuses for them. But I recalled what Anna said. We already have everything we need. One look in her eyes, and I could tell she knew why I was there. She knew I was desperate enough to agree to this. Nautilus gestured to the piece of paper in my hands. "Did you have any questions about the contract?" I glanced at him, then at Anna. For a moment, the ruthless, calculating soul that resided behind her cutesy exterior was visible through her eyes, staring expectantly at me. I nodded, resigned myself to my fate, and turned back to Nautilus. "Several," I said, "but I'm willing to ignore them." "Wonderful," Anna said, her ever-present smile widening even further. I handed her the contract, which she scanned into her computer with a copy machine from the 90S that might as well have coughed when she turned it on. In a few minutes, they'd printed out a route sheet for me, and I was packing my car with arrangements of mostly normal flowers. As Nautilus handed me my last bouquet, he stopped me on my way out. "Remember," he said, patting my shoulder, "always read the delivery instructions." There was a seriousness in his tone that told me I should take this advice to heart. "My dad's a lawyer," I replied, with a light-hearted tone. "I know how to read the fine print." The first route they gave me was small, just 3 stops. I sat down in the driver's seat of my purple 2013 Kia Soul and punched them in on my phone's GPS, a bouquet of roses with added chocolates for one Lord Satanicus M at a nearby legal office, one funeral bouquet for Roseanne, and one stinking nightshade houseplant for Melissa B. at a mobile home park called Bloodshed Acres. Searching for Bloodshed Acres on Google Maps, predictably, didn't yield any results. So, I did as I was told and read the instructions. Take exit, redacted, towards redacted, left turn on redacted, right turn on redacted, continue straight, exit vehicle at 10th stop sign, walk north into the desert 50 paces, wash hands in the unholy water, and knock 3 times. When the gate opens, return to your vehicle and drive into the park for delivery at unit number redacted. I briefly wondered if I might face eternal damnation for performing this ritual, but my stomach growled, reminding me of my more immediate need for grocery money. I shrugged, arranged my route on the GPS to as few miles as I could pare it down to, then headed out. The legal office was on the east side. I've decided to refrain from making the obvious joke about someone named Lord Satanicus being a lawyer in this post. But rest assured, it did occur to me when I pulled into the parking lot. Feel free to make your own version of the joke in the comments, as I'm sure it'll be funnier than whatever I thought of in the moment. Anyway, I rolled up to the entrance, roses and chocolates in hand, and took a picture of the flowers in front of the address number. I have to do this for every bouquet as proof of delivery. When I walked inside, I was greeted with the most normal-looking legal office I've ever seen. Big mahogany reception desk, attorney names engraved in gold, Times New Roman letters on the back wall, a few plush armchairs, and a coffee station in the corner to serve as a waiting room. Here's the problem, though. I knew who this lawyer was. Not personally, but everyone in my hometown knew his name and face, since his advertisements were plastered everywhere. You know those local lawyers who have billboards everywhere telling you to call if you're in an accident and you want some money for it? Yeah, that kind of guy. If his name were Lord Satanicus, I would have known, because it would be stamped in all capital letters onto every other bus stop and billboard in the city. I checked for any delivery instructions, and there were none listed for this one on the order sheet. My error here was simple. When Nautilus told me to read the instructions, I assumed those instructions would be correctly labeled, and that no one at the shop would ever make any mistakes. I put down the rose bouquet, then opened my trunk again. The stinking nightshade was still where I'd packed it in, wedged between a few towels and some boxes they'd given me before leaving. I checked the tag for Melissa B. on the nightshade, then the tag for Lord Satanicus on the rose bouquet. I chuckled. Southwest Sunsets really was just like any other dead-end job I'd worked. They tell you an important rule, then make enough mistakes that it's impossible to truly follow it. It was almost charming. I switched the tags, then brought the rose bouquet inside to the receptionist, whose name, as I had correctly guessed, was Melissa. "It's from my husband, for our anniversary," she told me. "We've been married 30 years today." The smile on her face lit up the room like a ray of sunshine, piercing through storm clouds. And for a brief moment, this job felt rewarding. That bright smile, right there, is why I included this little diversion from my otherwise spooky story. I made Melissa's day. Remember that for later, because what I'm about to tell you next is something that would make most people walk out on this job. I'm not talking about the delivery to Bloodshed Acres, by the way. It was nothing special. Following the directions went off without a hitch, and it turned out Lord Satanicus was just an average demon in his early 120s. He answered a door wearing plaid pajamas with holes in them and smelling like a college dorm room, a Nirvana song emanating from somewhere in his living room. He was a burnout, and stinking nightshade is like salvia for demons. A pretty normal delivery, as I would find out over time. That's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm here to tell you about Rosa. The chapel was in the middle of buttfuck nowhere, buried in the desert several miles of dirt road away from the nearest strip mall. It looked like a repurposed schoolhouse that hadn't been renovated since the 70s, with cracked sidewalks and a chain-link fence that had been warped by the sun and ripped up with wire cutters from kids ditching class. No one answered the door, but it was unlocked. I took a picture in front of the address number, then entered, hoping to find someone with whom I could leave this large basket of lilies. The interior was just as neglected. The linoleum floors were covered in skid marks and yellowed with age, and the walls, painted an ugly blue color, were covered in symbols, which I would later learn were Enochian letters. Some of the display cases, once used for elementary school projects, now contained wooden crucifixes decorated in whatever colorful pieces of junk they stumbled across. Starburst wrappers, shredded Pokemon cards, really anything you might find in an abandoned school that hadn't been cleaned out by squatters. I glanced through a window at the other end of the hall, which led to a playground outdoors. The paint on the steel jungle gym was faded and chipping, and years of exposure to the desert sun had cracked and bleached the plastic seats on the swing set. To my surprise, there were a few people playing in the playground. 4 of them, all elderly, all nude, except for the white and purple sashes around their necks. Despite their withered muscles and arthritic fingers, they were swinging around on the jungle gym, laughing and taunting each other like children in a language I had never heard before. After a few seconds, they noticed me watching. Immediately, they went silent. They got off the jungle gym and the swings, then stood stationary in the playground, arranging themselves in a row at the edge of the sidewalk and staring at me. They didn't approach, didn't speak to me, didn't even move, just stared. The air suddenly felt hostile. I muttered an apology to no one in particular and turned around to leave. I nearly ran into another elderly woman standing mere inches behind me, giving me a similar menacing stare. I hadn't heard her approach. The realization punched me in the gut. I hadn't read the delivery instructions. With trembling fingers, I pulled the order sheet out of my pocket. The instructions were in the same language written on the walls. I rubbed my temples. Of course. They tell me to follow the instructions, then write them in a language I can't fucking read. I glanced at the walls, then, without any other ideas, showed the instructions to the woman in front of me. She read them, nodded, then gestured for me to follow her. Without knowing what else to do, I silently obeyed, funeral lilies in hand. The woman led me to what I reckoned used to be the school cafeteria. It was populated by 4 more elderly individuals, dressed, or rather undressed, in a similar fashion to the folks on the playground. They had gathered around a cafeteria table, which they'd covered in purple and white satin that matched their sashes. One woman, whom I guessed must have been Rosa, lay on the table, hands crossed over her chest, and pale as death. My guide gestured to a platform behind their makeshift altar, one of 5, the other 4 of which were already populated with other arrangements of lilies, white roses, and hydrangeas. I placed mine in the remaining empty spot, and as I did so, got a better look at their altar. Several votive candles surrounded Rosa's corpse, all completely burned down, with yellow wax dripping off the satin and onto the floor. The elders were arranged in a circle around Rosa, one standing by each of her limbs, with platforms of flowers behind them. My guide took her spot in front of the platform she'd led me to, right by Rosa's head, then picked up what looked like a hairbrush. The other 4 folks were holding odd-looking shower scrubbers. When I finished, my guide nodded to the group, and they all placed one hand on Rosa, each grasping a leg, an arm, and her head. They started humming what sounded like a warped Gregorian chant, harmonizing perfectly in a pentatonic scale. My guide began brushing Rosa's hair, and as she did so, whole clumps of it fell away from her head, taking with it pieces of her scalp. I staggered backwards, clasping a hand over my face and stifling a yelp. The other elders took their implements to Rosa's body and began to scrub. I realized their tools didn't have bristles, but were coated in razor blades, shredding Rosa's skin until it sloughed off her body and slapped onto the floor. As they did so, Rosa opened her eyes and began screaming. An inhuman, warbled howling emanating from somewhere deep within her lungs. Her blood soaked into the satin beneath her, somehow turning purple as it spread through the cloth, then dripping onto the floor in puddles of viscous violet ink. I'm not ashamed to say I ran out of there. I felt sick. My stomach roiled in disgust, and I puked behind a prickly pear bush on my way back to my car. When I finished hacking and coughing, I looked down at the mess to find a puddle of thick violet ink. I covered my face again, but immediately pulled my hand away when I felt the wet fluid against my fingers. They were stained purple. With my clean hand, I opened the passenger side of my car, halfway sitting down in the seat with my feet still hanging out of the side. I fumbled to open the glove box, took out a few of the napkins and hand sanitizer I kept stored in there, and furiously scrubbed away as much ink as I could. I grabbed my water bottle, swished some of it around in my mouth, then spat it out on the ground, repeating this process until it was no longer purple. I sat there, trembling, eyes wide, for an indeterminate amount of time. The ritual I'd just seen wouldn't stop replaying in my head, leaking through every attempt to push it out of my mind, like the violet ink that had stained those sheets. When I finally remembered to blink, I realized the sun was setting. The drive home was long. I spent the entirety of it wondering how my life had led me to this point. How many choices I had made, why I'd made them, why they wouldn't have ever mattered, why I was always destined to end up here. I used to believe in free will. I don't anymore. The circumstances of your life will be what they are, knocking you around like bumpers in a pinball machine until you eventually end up in the gutter. The trajectory of our lives was decided the moment the universe came into existence, and my trajectory led me to a cult compound in the middle of the desert, watching a woman get torn to pieces in an esoteric ritual I could never hope to understand. The choice to continue driving for Southwest Sunsets was never my own. It wasn't made by my desperate circumstances either, although they may have led me here. It was made by one bright smile from a middle-aged receptionist in a scummy accident lawyer's legal office. When I walked into my dingy, government-subsidized apartment, I received a text message from Anna. "Can you come in tomorrow?" I sighed. "Sure. What time?" My son keeps talking to someone in the hallway. I don't know how long I have before it comes back. I'm writing this from my phone in the bathroom, as it's the only room that will lock in the house. My son is here, weeping, and I can hear something in his room pacing across the floorboards. The window is small, but if I have to, I think I could get us out. This all started 5 nights ago. I awoke to him on the baby monitor. He wasn't crying or calling for me. He was whispering. "Hi," he said. I remember checking the time. It was 1:34 a.m. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and looked at the feed of the camera in his room. His bed was empty. He was standing in the doorway, staring down the hallway. "Did you come back?" he asked. There was no one there. I could see all of the hallway from the camera. It was just darkness and a tiny nightlight glow from the top of the stairs. I thought he was sleepwalking. I got out of bed, went in to pick him up. "Who were you talking to?" I asked. He leaned against my chest, the tall one. I brushed it off. "Kids are silly. Imaginary friends. Could be anything a sleepy, tired child might say." I tucked him into bed. The next night, I heard him again. He was giggling. Actual, loud giggles. The kind he gets when he's being tickled. I checked the monitor. He was in the doorway. Again. "You can't come in," he said. "Daddy told me." He tilted his head, listening. "I know that you are big." And that's when the cold dread took over. Something was wrong. I got up, walked into the hallway. It was empty. My son was still staring. "Who's there?" I asked. He looked at me, annoyed. "You scared him." That was the first day he stopped knowing our dog's name. He kept pointing at her the whole day and asking, "That?" By day 3, words that he had known for years disappeared. Colors, songs, basic concepts. I started recording the baby monitor. That 4th night, I heard it. Underneath the babbling from my son was another voice. Slow, deep, gentle. It sounded like me. "Say it again," it whispered. "I don't know," my son replied. "You do know. You did once." My son started crying. The next morning he complained. His head hurt. I put the recording on his phone while he ate cereal, and the moment the other voice started, he dropped his spoon, covering his ears. "That's my inner voice." He took it. Last night I couldn't sleep. I turned out all the lights in the house and just sat in the hallway, on the floor, my back to the wall directly across from his room. I didn't want him to wake up and see me watching, but I needed to know what was happening. The baby monitor sat in my hand, screen displaying his bed, and his favorite blanket balled up at the foot of it. The house was quiet. Too quiet. 1:33 a.m. His bedroom door creaked open. On the monitor, I could see him stepping out. No sleepiness on his face, no groggy look in his eyes. He was simply standing there, staring down the hallway. "Are you here?" he whispered. I held my breath. Something answered. Not from the hallway, not from anywhere in the house, from the baby monitor. "I'm here." It was my voice. Perfectly clear. No crackle, no weird resonance. My son grinned. "Daddy." I stood up. My legs felt wobbly. "That's not me, darling. Come back to bed." He never once looked at me. He said, "You're too loud," he told the darkness. "You scare him." The voice on the monitor was calm. He always did. The air at the other end of the hallway felt thick, like something was shoving it out of the way as it approached. I couldn't see it, but the hair on my arms was prickling. "Who are you?" I asked the hallway. The voice didn't acknowledge me. "You have been very good," it said to my son. "You told me everything." "Everything?" I whispered. My words, my thoughts, my daddy. A chill went through my veins. Something was being taken from my son, pieces of him. And those pieces were also pieces of me. "Come here," I said, reaching out. He paused. The darkness at the other end of the hallway creaked. A single step. Slow, deliberate, heavy. Something was coming toward us. "He's ready now," the voice whispered. "I have no need for you anymore." I lunged for my son, pulling him into my arms. "Get out!" I screamed. The thing at the end of the hallway never slowed. Another step. The baby monitor crackled. "I need only one last thing," the voice said. "The rest of you." I ran. I slammed and bolted the bathroom door shut behind me, my son sobbing and clinging to me. Outside, something is out there, waiting, breathing, and it sounds like me. I can hear it saying my name, practicing the way I do, trying to get it right. I thought that night shift would be quiet until I saw Emily being rushed into the hospital on a stretcher, pushed by 3 police officers. It rained like hell that night. She was 13, maybe 14 years old, and had a fragile body covered in dry dirt and dark blood. Her left arm showed a deep bruise spreading from wrist to elbow. There were abrasions on her legs and shoulder, like she had rolled across rough ground. The girl was unconscious and completely soaked from the rain. "What happened?" I asked, gripping the side of the stretcher as we moved toward the emergency room. The officer in front of us, a heavy-set man with a tired face, kept flipping through a small notebook without looking up. His badge read, "Harris, Detective." "The girl called 911, reporting a break-in," he said. "She locked herself in her bedroom. When we arrived, we found her unconscious on the ground outside, in the backyard. But the worst was inside that house." "What do you mean?" I asked, cutting the sleeve of her shirt with my scissors. It wasn't a pretty scene. He finally looked at me, his tone calm, like someone who sees this kind of thing every week. The girl's parents were dead in the bedroom. Bruises around the neck, broken nails and signs of a struggle. There was water everywhere, too. We still don't get that part. I pressed gauze against a wound on her arm. The skin was scraped and split in places, swollen from impact, consistent with a fall. "Looks like she fell from something," I said. "Yeah," Harris replied. "Her room is on the 2nd floor, right above where we found her. She probably tried to get away from someone." "And did you catch the one who did this?" Harris hesitated, like he was weighing his words, solving an equation in his head. "Well," he said, "things don't make much sense right now. No signs of forced entry. No indication anyone else was inside the house. The family had security cameras outside, so that should tell us something." I secured a temporary wrap around her arm and nodded to the nurse who came to help me. We moved Emily into an observation room, and there stood just the 3 of us, me, Harris, and the nurse, setting up the IV and checking her vitals. While I worked, Harris stepped away from the bed. He stood near the wall, writing frantically in his notebook. Emily then moved for the first time, still unconscious, and a low sound slipped from her mouth. "Big Brother is here," she murmured, as if in a fever. "Don't let him in." I must have had almost 2 cups of coffee before the nurse called my name, her voice excited. "She's awake." I expected to find shock from her after she woke up. Instead, Emily sat upright in bed, perfectly still. Her eyes were fixed on the window, where rain was still falling like bricks against the glass. Her hands were clenched tight in her lap. Detective Harris was again inside the room, notebook in hand, standing uncomfortably close to her. "What are you doing?" I asked him. "She's not ready to take questions." "Tell me what happened." He ignored me. "You called 911 and said you were scared of a big brother or something." His pen hovered, waiting. Emily said nothing and kept on staring out the window. "Where was he standing?" Harris continued. "Did he touch you? Did you see him hurt your parents?" I stepped between them. "That's enough. She's a patient and a minor." Harris closed the notebook with a quiet snap, then left. I couldn't understand why he was treating a victim that directly. Emily kept staring at the window, her fists still closed. I checked her arm again. The swelling was already going down, and the nurse crouched beside the bed and followed Emily's gaze. "Would you like something to eat?" the nurse asked softly. My shoulder hurts, she finally spoke, not answering the question. I checked it, and it was a mild bruise. Nothing serious, I said, adjusting the pillow beneath her shoulder. She relaxed a little, so I asked if she felt any other pain and told her her hand would be fine soon. She nodded, and I took her silence as a response to trauma. Some people cry, others shut down. For a moment, I saw her glance toward a few magazines and books stacked at the far end of the room, forgotten there by a previous patient no one had bothered to clear out. I picked up the books and brought them to her. She opened one of them right away, curiosity lighting her face for the first time. "Do you read a lot?" I asked. She nodded and told me a little about the books she had read, how she really enjoyed science fiction, and how the new school her father made her attend didn't have a library as big as the last one. I didn't ask about her parents, but there was tension there she didn't put into words. "My big brother was the only one that gave me books," she continued suddenly. "That's when I read my first science fiction." "Who is this big brother you mentioned?" I asked. Emily stayed quiet for a few seconds before answering. "He's my brother," she said. "He's not here anymore, but he still talks to me a lot. Sometimes he is nice. Sometimes he is not nice. Sometimes he does bad things, especially when he sees that I'm angry." "Like what?" She didn't look up. "Like what he did today, to Dad and Mom." I talked with Emily a little longer, although she didn't come back to the murders. Then I stepped into the hallway, found Detective Harris standing by the nurse's station, hunched over his notebook. His eyes were wide, focused, almost manic. He waved me over. "The cameras don't show anyone entering the house," he said. "None of it makes sense. I need to get her statement. She mentioned a big brother a few times," I said. "Maybe you can start with that." "Yeah. Same one from the 911 call," he replied. "But it doesn't add up. Only 3 people lived in that house. And we're finding some concerning details about the girl." "Like what?" "We found Emily has been in long-term psychiatric care since she was 9. And she was expelled from her last school for a violent incident. I'm trying to reach her therapist and the school to understand what happened." My stomach tightened. I didn't like where this was going. "She's just a kid," I said. "She wouldn't have the physical strength to harm 2 adults." "I'm not saying she did it," Harris shot back. "But kids can be dangerous. You have no idea what I've seen on this job. Especially kids with the kind of issues I think Emily has." He paused, rubbing his face. "I don't understand exactly how it happened either, but something about this big brother thing doesn't add up." His phone rang, thankfully. "1 second," he said, walking away. I agreed something felt wrong, but I pushed it aside. I had other patients waiting. It took me an hour or so before I returned to Emily's room. She was alone now. The rain hadn't let up. She was still reading quietly, and I wondered if I had ever seen a child handle grief so calmly. I stepped closer, asked about the book, and checked the injury on her arm again. A few minutes later, Detective Harris stormed in, eyes sharp. Emily lowered her head when she saw him. "Did you try to strangle a girl at your school, Emily?" he asked, standing too close to the bed. "Is that why you were expelled?" Emily's fists tightened, and she stood silent. "And this big brother who hurt your parents?" Harris continued. "Dr. Janik told me you often talk to him when you're alone. Isn't that right?" He leaned in, resting his arms on the edge of the bed. "Tell me what really happened that night, Emily. Then we can help you." "He did it," she said quietly, her voice breaking. "My big brother." "Enough of this nonsense," Harris snapped. "Enough," I raised my voice, stepping between them. "She's in shock, and you can't interrogate her here. I'm no lawyer, but I'm pretty sure this isn't okay." Harris pulled his hands back and took a step away. Andre, right? He continued, his voice softer now. Your big brother's name. The one who died 5 years ago in the lake. I remember the news. Emily froze at the sound of the name. Who is Andre? I asked. Her older brother, Harris said, flipping open his notebook again. Drowned at Lake Sammamish with a group of friends one summer. A tragedy. Emily, you've been hearing him ever since, haven't you? Tears finally began to fall from Emily's eyes. This isn't a police station, I said, my voice tight with anger. Get out, now. No. Let him stay, Emily interrupted me, lifting her face. I'll tell him everything that happened. I told her she didn't have to say anything yet, that it would be better to wait for a representative. Her grandmother was on her way from a nearby town and should be here within the hour. She shook her head. I can do this, she said. I'll tell it now. I have to. I swallowed hard as I caught the look on Harris's victorious face. I told them I had other patients to attend to and left the room with a bitter taste in my mouth, leaving the two of them alone. A few minutes later, I was in the break room, halfway through my third cup of coffee of the night, listening to the rain pound outside. Thunder rolled past the windows, and a few lights flickered before suddenly going out. The blackout lasted less than a minute before the backup generator kicked in. When the lights returned, some of them were dimmer than usual, flickering as the system stabilized. As I walked back through the patient corridor where Emily was, I noticed something wrong immediately. Her room was completely dark. I opened the door and felt something cold and wet soak into my shoes. There were a couple of inches of water covering the entire floor. Emily was still on the bed, her face locked in an expression of terror I don't know how to describe. She looked at me like she was desperately trying to warn me of something, but she didn't need to say anything. I saw it on the floor. Detective Harris. He lay in a spreading pool of water, his body still. His eyes were bulged, staring at nothing, and his neck bent at an angle so extreme it made my stomach turn. My instinct was to scream for help, but Emily spoke first. Stay quiet, she warned me, or he'll touch you. I wanted to ask who, but the words wouldn't come out. And then I realized I was about to get my answer whether I wanted it or not. I felt something behind me, pressed against the wall near the door I had just entered through. Its shadow stretched across the floor, tall and wide. Slowly, I turned. It was pale, towering over me by more than 5 feet. Its shape was vaguely human, but its limbs were too long, too thin. There was no hair, no clothing. Water dripped from its body, and its torso was tangled with algae and freshwater plants. Its eyes were white, empty, and unblinking. Don't hurt him, Andre, Emily whispered to that thing. Please, he's a good one. I'll go with you this time. It didn't respond. It just kept staring at my petrified body. Emily spoke to me again, her voice firm now. Walk slowly to the door. He won't hurt you if you do just that. I can't just leave you with it, I said, using the last bit of courage I had left. A low, wet growl filled the room. The thing didn't like that, and every cell in my body told me he wanted to do to my neck exactly what it had done to Harris. He won't hurt me, she said. He just wants to protect me. Stay with me. I knew then I couldn't do anything. Staying would only get me killed, so I did what she said. Step by step, I moved toward the door, turned the handle, and stepped back into the hospital hallway. The thing allowed me to do it, its white eyes following me every inch of the way. But immediately after I got out, I ran. I ran like I never had before, straight to the head nurse's station, shouting for her to call hospital security and the police. Then I went back toward Emily's room, my legs weak with guilt for leaving her behind. I had left the door open when I fled, so I peeked inside carefully, trying to get a better look at the thing. Emily was no longer on the bed. I stepped inside. Emily wasn't in the room. Neither was that thing. On the bed, resting on the blanket where she had been sitting, was the book I had given her. The window she had stared at all night was now open, rain blowing in, wide open.